Alright, let's lock in for Unit 2 of the BTEC course. So this course, we're going to be focusing on 5 main topics. So first, we're going to be looking at lifestyle factors. Lifestyle factors. Then we're going to move on to screening and health monitoring. So these are things you're going to do before you bring on a client onto your training program. Then we're going to look at nutrition. Nutrition is quite brief, just looking at the basics of nutrition and why that's important. 4, we're going to move on to training methods. Training methods, quite straightforward as well, which types of training you need to use to be able to get certain health and fitness benefits. And lastly, we're going to wrap up with program design, which kind of ties all of these together, really. So those are the 5 things we're going to be looking at. Unit 2, in a nutshell, is teaching you how to become a personal trainer. It's teaching you to become a teaching you how to become a health professional. So by the end of this, you're going to be able to take a real person, understand their lifestyle and their health data, and then build a program from that genuinely improves their health, their sport performance, and their well-being as well. And throughout all of that, you're going to need to justify each and every single choice of why you're designing their program that way. So if you want to be a personal trainer, this is the perfect unit for you. Forget the other units. You can fail the other units, but do not fail this unit. Do not fail this unit, okay? Don't fail the other units either. So we're going to start with our assessment objectives, AO1, AO2, up onto AO5. So AO1 is basically testing your ability to demonstrate knowledge and understanding of lifestyle effects on health and well-being. That's AO1. AO2 is all about being able to apply fitness principles, which we are going to look at in this video. Lifestyle modification, nutrition, and training methods to an individual's needs and goals. So nutrition and training methods to an individual, this individual being your client, needs / goals. When we talk about AO3, we are talking about analyzing and interpreting screening information. So screening information could be things like questionnaires. We're going to look at questionnaires in this video, such as the PARQ. It could also mean health monitoring tests as well. So that's AO3. AO4 is evaluate qualitative and quantitative evidence to make informed judgments about improvement. So evaluate qualitative and quantitative evidence to make informed judgments about improvement. And finally, AO5, which is the ability to develop a fitness training program. And this is the key bit where you get the high marks with appropriate justification. With appropriate justification. So that's AO5. So let's open up the floor with lifestyle factors and their effects. Nice little bubble around it. Under this topic, we're gonna start with exercise or physical activity. Exercise and or physical activity, because exercise and physical activity, they might sound like the same thing, but exercise is engaging in physical activity to improve your health or your fitness. Meanwhile, physical activity is just any form of activity. So there's a slight nuance in it. Let me write that down. So exercise is more structured. So exercise is planned, structured physical activity with the goal of improving fitness or health. And physical activity, on the other hand, is more general. So it's simply any body movement that uses energy. So this is you, and this could be anything really. This could be running, performing in a sport, playing in a netball game. It could be cleaning your room, just anything. Now, the great thing about physical activity / exercise is that you can benefit from positive effects, and these effects influence your physical health, your psychological health, social health, and even your economic standing. So some physical effects of exercise and physical activity are better or improved body composition. Body composition is basically the how much muscle and how much fat is in your body, basically what your body is made out of. It also strengthens your bones, improves posture, improves fitness as well, and lowers the risk of chronic disease. Now, some psychological effects of physical activity / exercise. We have, it reduces stress, like after you've gone out on break time at school, you've played in the playing ground, you've had fun, there's a lot of good chemicals that get reduced in your body, and then you feel lighter, you feel less stressed, you feel happier. And as a result of reducing stress, it also reduces depression risk. So depression risk falls, it improves your mood, improves posture. Nope. And it builds confidence and self-esteem. Now, some social effects of physical activity and exercise can help you to build your social skills. For example, if you're playing in a team sport, you learn to communicate and interact with other people, and that builds your social skills, and it builds your sense of community. And that's really it for social. Then we move on to economic effects. And the main one is that because of a stronger immune system when you get from exercising or engaging in physical activity, you take fewer sick days, and in turn, this reduces the costs to healthcare systems. So you get sick less, and the NHS isn't under as much pressure, because few people being sick is a good thing. Okay, now real quick, this is a government guideline. This is a government guideline you should know. And this guideline for adults states that adults should aim for 150 minutes of moderate intensity of exercise or physical activity a week, or 75 minutes of vigorous activity a week. But that's not it, because it also says plus strength activities on 2 days, and reduce sedentary time. So 150 minutes of moderate intensity per week, plus strength activities on 2 days, and reduce sedentary time. We're going to look at what it means to be sedentary later on in this video. Basically, being sedentary just means having little to no physical activity in your lifestyle. It's way below the guidelines. Or if your client is very active, you can say the client is doing very well compared to the guidelines and is above the requirements for the guidelines. Okay, now moving on from government guidelines, we're going to take a look at what it means to have a balanced diet. So fundamentally, what is a balanced diet? A balanced diet is a diet that provides enough energy and nutrients for health, body function, and activity across the main food groups. So, provides enough energy and nutrients for health, body function, and activity. And this is a key part as well, don't forget this, across the main food groups. So when it comes to talking about the balanced diet, you're expected to be familiar with something we call the Eat Well guide. So it's sort of a pie chart which shows you the relative proportions of different types of foods that make up a balanced diet. So we're going to roughly draw it out. So let's say this is a big chunk right here for fruit and veg, fruits and veg, and then let's just draw out all the chunks first. Okay, so that's fruit and veg, and then this would be carbohydrates and starches. This would be dairy. This would be protein, and this would be sugars and fats. So for this course, you don't need to know the percentages for each of these sections of a balanced diet, but if you do want to know, then fruit and veg should make up around 33%. Carbohydrates and starch should make up around 33%. Dairy should make up around 15%. Protein should make up around 12%. And sugars and fats should make up around 7%. Hydration. The Eat Well guide also recommends that you should aim for around 68 cups or glasses of fluid a day. I don't know why they didn't just say water, but 68 cups, glasses of fluid a day. And obviously you might need more when it gets hot or when you're being active. Now let's look at some positive risk-taking activities. So these are things that challenge you. So usually outdoor adventures, activities such as hiking, climbing, water sports. And when you're talking about these, always try to link these to confidence, motivation, skill development. well-being, and even good habits. Now that we've looked at some positive lifestyle factors like balanced diet, hydration, different types of activity, let's look at the not so good lifestyle factors. So some negative lifestyle factors that you need to know about. Number one, smoking. Why is this negative? Well, because the substance in the smoke damages airways and reduces oxygen delivery efficiency. And this leads to an increased risk in certain diseases like CHD, coronary heart disease, and lung disease, and emphysema, and a whole bunch of diseases that you don't even want to know. But the ones that will help you in your exam are CHD and lung disease. So increased risk of, I'll just write the whole thing, coronary heart disease and lung disease. And this could lead to a drop in performance. It can make your recovery to suffer, and your training won't be as effective. So when you're speaking about this in exams, don't just say this is bad for your lungs. Link it to the respiratory system, which we spoke about in Unit 1, and how it can damage your aerobic capacity, and also link it to the cardiovascular system, and link that all together to give you a well-rounded answer. The second negative lifestyle factor, alcohol, specifically excess alcohol. So this is basically being an alcoholic. So what's happening here is alcohol can lead to some nasty issues. A lot of them with the liver. So liver damage, stroke, hypertension, and even depression. To keep these risks low, UK guidance recommends no more than 14 units per week. And that's spread across days with drink-free days. Spread across days. Next negative lifestyle factor is stress, and again, excess stress, because there is actually positive stress, and you don't need to know it for this course, but positive stress is something called eustress. Again, you don't need to know it for this course, but eustress is positive stress. And when we say stress, we're focusing on chronic stress, which can increase blood pressure and harm mental well-being, which could lead to worse sleep and worse diet choices, because sometimes when you're stressed, you eat more, you don't socialize as much, and it can just lead to a domino effect of negative lifestyle choices. So leading to worse problems and worse diet choices. Remember, we're focusing on chronic stress. Second to last negative lifestyle factor we're going to look at is sleep problems. So this is a big one because sleep is arguably the most important lifestyle factor. So having poor sleep can affect so many things. It can affect your mood, your appetite, your recovery, your immune system. So having a healthy sleep program, healthy sleep routine is important. Because you can have the perfect training program for your client, but the whole program will collapse and they won't have any progress, even if the plan is perfect, just because they have poor sleep. So poor sleep affects mood, appetite regulation, and recovery. And finally, like we spoke about before, the final negative lifestyle factor you need to know is sedentary lifestyle. So sedentary lifestyle, like I mentioned before, is a lifestyle that includes little to no physical activity. So this would be characterized by long periods of sitting with little movement throughout the day, and having a sedentary lifestyle raises health risk and makes beginners more injury prone. If training volume jumps too fast, so you don't want to go take a client who is sitting on their couch 24/7 every single day and then just go drop them into a marathon and say, go on, run the marathon, because they're most likely gonna get severely badly injured. So what you want to do in that case is you want to start slow. You want to start with a 1K run, a 2K run, then a 5K run, then a 7K run, then a 10K run. And this is called progressive overload. And that's one of the principles of training, which we're going to look at in this video as well. Now let's talk about lifestyle modification techniques. You have a client, they come to you, they want to achieve a certain goal, right? But maybe they have a few negative lifestyle choices. Your first thought is going to be, how do I change this? How do I change these behaviors realistically? That's what we're going to talk about. So step one, you want to identify common barriers. So these could be things like time, they don't have enough time because of their job, the costs, maybe they can't afford to go to the gym or to do tennis training or to do cricket training or whatever it is. The transport as well, they don't have a car, they can't afford transport, their location, maybe they live in the countryside, or maybe there's no gyms around them. Also, we can think about confidence. Maybe they're lacking confidence to actually step out of their comfort zone and do something to improve their health or their fitness. Maybe they're lacking motivation, It's raining outside, they don't want to go out and run. Maybe they don't know anything about the body and why it's important to exercise the body. Maybe they are afraid of getting injured. Maybe they've had an injury before, or they know someone who's had an injury. And lastly, social support. Maybe they don't have many friends who exercise, so maybe their family doesn't really encourage exercise. So these are different things that you can take into account, and you can even add more that you can think of right now. You can add more as we go along. So naturally, what do you do after you identify a problem or a barrier? You find the solution. So step 2 is to pick solutions that match the barrier. So, for example, if the barrier is no time, let's say the barrier is no time, then you can schedule some at-home workouts. So maybe they don't have time to go to the gym, that's fine. They can work out at home. You can advise them to maybe work while standing or while walking if they have a table treadmill, a desk treadmill or something like that. You tell them to take the stairs more and things like that don't take a lot of time, but there's still solutions that are realistic and that can actually increase their physical activity. So that's just one solution. You can come up with a bunch of other solutions for all these other problems just by thinking creatively. And generally, the goal of these solutions should be to increase physical activity within the client. So very quickly, this is a list from the exam board of different strategies that a smoker can use to solve the problem of smoking. So if your client faces a problem of smoking, you want them to quit so they can start on their training program, then you can refer them to the NHS smoking helpline. They can do a nicotine replacement therapy or quick kit support packs or even acupuncture. I don't know exactly how acupuncture helps, but it can help to control the mechanisms of addiction. So similarly, for reducing alcohol, these are some strategies that you can refer your client to. So it could be counseling, self-help groups, or alternative treatments. And lastly, to address stress, these are some stress management strategies that you can refer your client to. So we have assertiveness training, which is basically training to behave in a way that reflects your best interests. So I would assume in an assertiveness training course, you would probably get things that teach you how to be able to say no to taking on too much stress, so that you're not just saying yes to everything and making sure that you're actually prioritizing yourself as well. We also have goal setting. So if you set goals, then they become a little bit less overwhelming and that can reduce stress. We also have time management, improving your time management skills. We have physical activity because of all the benefits it comes with. We have positive self-talk. self-explanatory. We have relaxation. We also have breathing techniques which can help to facilitate the process of relaxation. We also have meditation, alternative therapies, and having a healthy work-life balance. Okay, that's it for our first topic of this video, lifestyle factors. Now we're gonna move on to screening processes for training program planning. So firstly, what is screening? What is it? Screening simply is just the process of collecting information to check whether training is safe, to identify risk, and to guide program design. That's all it is. Whenever you see screening, that's what it means. And screening is important because it helps to improve our clients' safety, it protects us from professional liability, and it helps to improve your program's accuracy. And when you're doing your screening, remember these 3 things. You should have informed consent, follow data protection, and respect client confidentiality. So in a nutshell, make sure that the data you're collecting is handled lawfully, and make sure you keep personal information private. Also, another important thing that you should not do is train through any serious risk. So you want to refer to a doctor if screening suggests a serious risk. So your client comes to you, they have chest pain, they're fainting, they have really high blood pressure. Don't just train through it. Refer them to a doctor. Now we're going to look at health monitoring tests. So these include things like blood pressure, resting heart rates, BMI, which stands for body mass index and waist to hip ratio. And we're going to look at each of them individually now. So blood pressure, we all know what that means. Blood pressure can be recorded using two aspects. So we're going to look at the systolic and diastolic. So when we talk about systolic, that simply means the pressure when the heart contracts. That's all it means. And diastolic, if you can guess, that is the pressure when the heart relaxes. So if you remember back in unit 1, we talked about the cardiac cycle, the conduction of the heart. And in that cardiac cycle, there are several phases where certain chambers of the heart will be relaxed and open, and there's other phases where the chambers of the heart will contract and squeeze. So those phases where they contract and squeeze are called systole, and the phases where they relax and open, we call them diastole. And when the NHS is measuring blood pressure, they consider high blood pressure to be at 140/90 when you're in a clinic. But when you're at home, if you measure blood pressure at home, they consider it to be high when it's at 135/85. So that is a benchmark that the NHS uses. Now moving on to resting heart rate. Resting heart rate is just very, very, very simple. It literally says what it does. Resting heart rate is the amount of beats per minute when you are resting. So heartbeat per minute, or BPM, at rest. And when you train, your resting heart rate decreases over time. This isn't a bad thing. This is because your stroke volume increases. So your stroke volume increases with training. And a normal adult resting heart rate would be around 60 to 100 beats per minute. But with athletes, it can be sometimes lower. Some athletes can have it as low as 40 beats per minute. Alright, now moving on to BMI, or body mass index. When we talk about BMI is basically, it's a metric that estimates your weight status using your height and weight. So it's useful for the general population to measure a general population level of risk, but it's not perfect. It's not ideal when you're using it with certain athletes because it doesn't differentiate muscle from fat. So BMI estimates weight status Using height and weight. Useful for population risk, but not perfect for muscular athletes. Because sometimes you might have an athlete that is really muscular, like a boxer, for example. For example, let's say Anthony Joshua. If Anthony Joshua were to measure his BMI, it might put him as overweight. But that's not really accurate because he's not obese or overweight. He's not an unhealthy weight. He's the perfect weight for his sport. He needs that muscle to be able to perform in his sport. On the other hand, maybe a gymnast, a really lean, small gymnast, Simone Biles, Suni Lee, for example, they might hop on a scale and the BMI might be underweight, and that might seem like a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing because they need to be at that weight. They need to be at that level of leanness to be able to excel at their sport. So that's what I mean by BMI. It's not really perfect for athletes, for muscular athletes, because it doesn't separate from muscle and fat. Now, waist to hip ratio, or WHR. So your waist to hip ratio, in just simple terms, basically just the waist circumference divided by the hip circumference. And this is a metric that helps to show the fat distribution around your abdominal area. And this is a risk indicator, which means that if you're a man, then having a weight to hip ratio greater than 0.9 is considered higher risk. And for women, having a waist to hip ratio of greater than 0.85 is considered higher risk. Now we're going to look at something called normative data. We're going to talk about interpreting results using interpreting results can't spell today, using normative data. So first of all, what is normative data? So normative data, in a nutshell, is any data that informs about population norms, athlete norms, or accepted health ranges. So for example, in this health monitoring test, we looked at the different values that would constitute high risk in several of these tests. That's an example of normative data. It's reference data that gives us an idea of what the norms are. So this is how you would use it in your exam. Firstly, you would state the result. Secondly, you'd compare the results to a relevant norm. Then you would interpret its meaning, followed up by a recommended action, and lastly, you would justify. So to give you a good example about blood pressure, you might have a client come to you and you've done the health monitoring test, you've got the result. You could say something like, compared with accepted healthy ranges, the client's blood pressure suggests elevated risk. So the program should prioritize moderate intensity aerobic work and lifestyle change with medical referral if indicated. So that's taking into account these steps. You would obviously state the result, the specific result that you got. And then what we've done is we've compared that result to normative data to be able to come up with the conclusion that the client has an elevated risk. And then the interpretation for that is that the program should prioritize moderate intensity aerobic workouts. And we've compared the result to a relevant norm, and that has given us the interpretation that the client's blood pressure shows an elevated risk. So the recommended action is what? The program should prioritize moderate intensity aerobic work and lifestyle change with medical referral if indicated. And throughout this whole sentence, I've made sure to justify, because the justification for having an elevated risk is reducing the intensity of the workout and making sure that I refer to a medical professional if needed. So hopefully you got the hang of that. We're going to move on to program-related nutritional needs now. So now for program-related nutritional needs, these are just some quick definitions that you just need to know. Easy peasy definitions. We're going to start with RDA. This is the recommended daily amount of a nutrient to meet most people's needs. So usually in the nutritional information on any food item or sometimes some medicines, if you look on the back, you see RDA somewhere there. Next, basal metabolism. This is just the energy your body uses just to stay alive. And we also have something known as the energy balance. And basically, energy balance just refers to the interaction between the energy coming into your body and the energy being used or leaving your body, basically. So when we talk of energy balance, you need to know 3 definitions. You need to know about surplus, you need to know about deficit, and you need to know about balance. These all relate to weight. So if you're in a surplus, that means weight gain is likely. If you're in a deficit, that means weight loss is likely. And if you're in a balance, then you're maintaining your weight. So weight maintenance is likely. Now we're going to look at balanced diet again, but this time we're looking at the components of a balanced diet. So there are 2 main types of nutrients that you want to remember. And these are macronutrients and micronutrients. So macro written in big letters because these are the nutrients that you need in big amounts. So these are your carbs, your protein, and your fats. And micronutrients over here, these are the nutrients that you don't need in high amounts. You need only small quantities of micronutrients. So these are vitamins and minerals. And some examples of micronutrients, we have calcium, vitamin D. So calcium and vitamin D are important for improving your bone health. Iron is important for oxygen transport in the blood. And vitamin C is important for strengthening your immune system and helping to repair your tissues. Carbs are your main source of energy. Proteins are essential for growth and repair of your tissues. And fats are essential to maintain your hormones, your cell membranes, and to provide energy during low intensity exercise. And this links to the Unit 1 video where we spoke about the aerobic energy system and how that utilizes carbs and fats as energy sources. We previously spoke about hydration. Now we're going to speak about dehydration and the impacts that this can have for performance. So when you're dehydrated, you're thirsty, your urine is dark, you might even get dizzy, lightheaded, you might feel really tired, mouth can get really dry. Those are some symptoms you're probably going to feel when you're dehydrated, right? And these can lead to some negative performance impacts where you have lower plasma volume, and this reduces your body's ability to regulate its own temperature. So this can lead to poorer temperature control and also poor oxygen delivery. And if you have poor oxygen delivery, you're not providing enough oxygen to the muscles to be able to release energy. And so, ultimately, this can lead to earlier fatigue. But when talking about hydration, we have dehydration, but we also can have something called hyperhydration, which is where you drink too much fluid. And this can lead to really, really critically low sodium levels, which can cause something known as hyponatremia. Can also lead to headaches, nausea, confusion, drowsiness, and in the most severe cases can lead to putting you in a coma or causing seizures. Okay, now we're going to look at some nutritional strategies. So these are little tactics that people can use for weight gain, weight loss, and other aids and sports drinks that can be used as well. So for weight gain, now we're talking about healthy weight gain. Generally, it helps to be in a calorie surplus. If you think back to energy balance, a calorie surplus is basically when the energy in is greater than the energy out. So you're consuming more energy than you're using. We also want a strength training focus. It's also important to eat enough protein spread out across the day. And lastly, we want to eat dense foods, so foods that are packed with energy, but not low quality dense food like junk food, because you can have a Big Mac which is dense in carbs and calories, but it doesn't have the right quality of calories. So we're thinking of things like rice, pasta, nuts, dairy, things like that. Now for weight loss, again, healthy weight loss, you want to focus on being in a small calorie deficit. So again, keyword small calorie deficit. And a calorie deficit is when the energy in or the calories you're consuming is less than the energy out. So energy in, calories in are less than the energy, is less than the calories that you're burning. You want to keep protein adequate for muscle retention. You want to increase foods that are dense in fiber, so foods that have a lot of volume. So things like vegetables, whole grains, things like that. And lastly, we want to increase daily movement. So maybe you want to walk more, you want to do more training, whatever it is, just increasing daily movement. We're going to look at some ergogenic aids, which are basically anything that is used to enhance performance or training capacity. So these are pretty straightforward. Could be energy bars or energy gels, protein drinks, or we also have something called carbohydrate loading. So carbohydrate loading is a tactic, is a strategy that is used to maximize glycogen stores before you engage in long endurance events. So it's not really needed for short exercise sessions, but for example, if you have a marathon coming up in 2 weeks or in a few weeks time, an athlete might do some carbohydrate loading or carbo loading. Next, we have sports drinks. And these are just some easy, straightforward definitions you need to know. So when you hear isotonic, that means it replaces fluids plus carbs during and after moderate to long exercise sessions. When you hear hypotonic, that means it helps with faster fluid replacement. So it has less sugar than isotonic. And when you hear of hypertonic, that means it has a higher carbohydrate concentration, and it's usually used for glycogen restoration, but it makes you a bit more full, so your stomach gets emptied out more slowly. Okay, on to the next topic. We're going to look at training methods for different components of fitness. And it only makes sense that we start by looking at the actual components of fitness. So the components of fitness you have to know. Let's start with aerobic endurance. Aerobic endurance is basically how efficiently can the cardiorespiratory system work to supply oxygen and nutrients during physical activity. So it's the cardiorespiratory system working efficiently to supply oxygen, nutrients during sustained activity. Next, we have strength. Strength is the maximum force exerted by a muscle or muscle group. Muscular endurance refers to repeated contractions over time against light to moderate resistance. And lastly, and next, we have flexibility, which is having adequate range of motion in joints. Next, we have speed, and I don't mean I show speed. Speed is the ability to move the body or limbs quickly. Body composition is the ratio of fat to fat-free mass in the body. We spoke about this before, if you remember. We then have agility, which is the ability to perform a rapid whole body movement with a change of speed and or direction. And usually agility would be in response to an external stimulus. So for example, in football, you might express agility by trying to get away from a defender. So in that case, you're responding to the defender. Balance is the ability to maintain the body's center of mass, or you could also say line of gravity, over the base of support. And this can be when standing, so when you're static, stationary, or when you're moving. So when you're standing, it would be static balance. When you're moving, it would be dynamic balance. Coordination is the ability to use the senses. So your 5 senses, which are sight, touch or feel, hearing, I guess taste, and smell, and body parts together to perform movements smoothly and accurately. Reaction time this is the time interval between a stimulus and the motor response. So this is, for example, if I was racing someone and the race was started by someone clapping, my reaction time is the time from the clap to when I launch off. So when the person claps, how many milliseconds does it take for me to actually start running from that clap? So that's reaction time. And we have power, which is the ability to produce force quickly. So power is basically force times velocity. That's the formula for power. Now let's look at training methods. These are methods that we can use to be able to train up those components of fitness. We're going to start with aerobic endurance training methods. And when we talk about aerobic endurance, we're looking at activities that are moderate intensity. So that's around 50 to 70% of max heart rate. And max heart rate is calculated using a formula which is 220 minus your age. So if you're 20 years old, then your max heart rate will be 220 minus 20, which is 200. And 50 to 70 of 200, well, 50% of 200 is 100, and 70% of 200 is 140. So 50 to 70% basically means 100 to 140 beats per minute is the range that we want to be looking at for aerobic endurance. So different methods include continuous training, which is a training method where you remain at a steady, moderate pace for at least 30 minutes. At least 30 minutes. Then we have fartlek training. And no, this doesn't have anything to do with farting. This is a training method where you're moving through different types of terrain at a different pace. So for example, cross-country running, you might be running on a pavement and then running across mountains and then running in a puddle. These are different types of terrain and you're going to be moving at different speeds. So that's fartlek training. Next we have interval training. And interval training is basically when you have periods of work followed by periods of rest and recovery. So if you do a quick sprint and then you rest, and then you do another sprint and then you rest, and then you sprint and then you rest, and then you sprint and then you rest, that's interval training. Or if you do 5 push-ups and then rest, and then 5 push-ups and then rest, and then push-ups and then rest, and then push-ups and then rest, that's interval training. So any type of training where you're working followed by rest is interval training. And the last type of aerobic endurance training is circuit training. And circuit training is basically where you have different stations. Think about being in a gym. Think about being in a sports hall, right? And then you set up different stations for different types of exercise. Let's say I have a group of 10 people who I'm coaching, and I set up this station to do push-ups, I set up this station to do sit-ups, I set up this station to do burpees, I set up this station to do high knees, and I set up this station to do planks. So these are different stations. They're going to start from the first station, go to the second station, go to the third station, go to the fourth station, go to the fifth station, and then circle back again. That's circuit training because they're going around in a circuit. Next, we have strength training methods. And we are going to look at strength focus. So this is where heavier load is being lifted with fewer reps and longer rest. So reps just means repetition, number of times that you're lifting the weight. Set means group of reps. So if I say I'm doing 2 sets of 5, that means 2 sets of 5 reps. That means I'm going to do 5 reps of a particular exercise 2 times. So strength focus means you're lifting a heavier weight for fewer reps and you're taking longer rest periods in between sets so that the nervous system can recover properly. We also have something called pyramid sets. So pyramid sets are very easy. If you think of a pyramid, boom, 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 boom. So you can go up or down the pyramid. So pyramid sets, in a nutshell, is when you change the load and the reps across sets. So I might be doing 5 sets of push-ups, and I tell myself that with each set, I'm going to do 3 more push-ups. That means I'm going up the pyramid. So I do 5, then I do 8, then I do 11, then I do 14, then I do 17. I'm doing 3 more each time. I'm going up the pyramid. Or I can say with each set, I'm going to do 3 less. So I can start from 20 push-ups with my first set, and then do 17, and then do 14, and then do 11, and then do 8, and then do 5, and then do 2. So that's me going down the pyramid. So pyramid sets work both ways. And we have to consider the equipment. And the equipment for strength training is usually going to be free weights or resistance machines. Now on to muscular endurance methods. With muscular endurance, we are basically looking at resisting fatigue. So any exercise that helps to resist fatigue in a muscle over time. So muscular endurance training tends to use lighter loads, more reps with shorter rest periods. Now let's look at core stability. Your core is very important because it helps you to be able to perform other movements as well. So core stability, very straightforward. This is simply the ability to control the trunk and pelvis position so force transfers efficiently to the limbs. And this obviously leads to reduced injury risk. So the types of training we can look at for core stability are things like yoga, Pilates, planks, bridges, V-sits, and so on and so forth. Flexibility training methods. So we have 3 types of stretching to train flexibility. First is the most common one, static stretching. And we have 2 types. We have active static stretching and passive static stretching. So active stretching is when you hold a position using your own muscles. So if you touch your toes and just stay there, that's static stretching. Passive stretching is when you have external help to hold you in that position. So if I was to tie a rubber band around my legs and hold on to it, that would be passive stretching because I'm using that band to hold me in position. Or if I was to get a partner to basically push down on my back to help me touch my toes, that's also passive stretching because I'm having external help. Next, we have dynamic stretching. And this is where we have controlled movement through the range of motion. So these are exercises like lunge walks, opening and closing the gates for anyone who plays football, shoulder circles, leg swings, those types of things where you're actually moving while stretching at the same time. And lastly, we have PNF, which is a very simple way of abbreviating proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. And this is basically where You stretch, you contract the muscle, then you relax. And this helps you go into a deeper stretch. So using the hamstring stretch, where I'm reaching forward to touch my toes, let's say I stretch forward and then I contract my hamstrings, contract my legs, and then I relax. And then I push even more into a deeper stretch. That's PNF. So in effect, you're pushing past your range of motion. And usually this is done with a partner. So I would stretch, contract, relax, and then my partner will push me even deeper. Next, we have speed methods. So different ways we can train for speed. We can use hollow sprints, which is basically where you have sprint and then float and then sprint. We also have acceleration sprints, which is where you're only focusing on like the first few steps, like the first 3 or 4 steps, focusing on that initial drive. And then we have intervals, which is where you have timed sprints followed by recovery. And lastly, we have resistance drills. So these are things like sprinting up a hill, sprinting while pushing a sled, sprinting while being held back by a parachute, and things like that. So for agility, we have something called the SAQ and also other sport-specific drills. Different sports have their own specific drills that can be slightly different. So sport-specific drills. For balance, we can train balance on stable or unstable surfaces, and that can help to train static and also dynamic balance. For coordination, activities can be anything that involve 2 or more body parts. So you often see a lot of boxers or basketball players juggling tennis balls, 2, 3, or even 4 tennis balls. That's helping on their coordination. And for reaction time, this is just anything where you have to react to an external stimulus. Perfect example is during a 100-meter sprint or any sprint where you have to wait for the whistle to be blown before you start running. You have to react to the whistle. Having a better reaction time means you react more quickly. And lastly, we have power. So this can be trained with plyometrics, ladders, cones, hurdles, jumping on benches, over benches, throwing medicine balls. So we have plyometrics, ladders, cones, hurdles, and even medicine balls. Okay, we are almost at the end of this video. Our final topic to look at is training program design. So now we're going to look at the principles of training. We have frequency. This is just how often. We have intensity. This is how hard you train. We have time, which is the duration of your training. We have type, which is the method of training. And usually a good acronym that students use to remember this is FIT. So FIT you can use to remember these 4 principles. And the other principles, we have specificity, is how similar your training is to the actual sport that you're training for. You have overload. So overload is the idea that to improve your fitness, you must place the body under stress, and you must place the body under an increasingly greater amount of stress than it is used to. And that's going to force the body to change. It's going to force you to improve. Progression is like a use it or lose it idea. So basically it means that if you stop training for a long period of time, or if you reduce training intensity or the amount of training you're doing for a long enough period of time, then your fitness begins to decline and your performance also drops. So if I've been running on the treadmill for 20 minutes and then all of a sudden I start running for only 5 minutes, then my fitness is probably going to drop. My aerobic performance, then my aerobic endurance is probably going to drop. If I stop doing push-ups, then my upper body strength is probably going to drop. We also have rest and recovery, which is pretty self-explanatory. Just putting time apart to let the body to repair, the muscles, the tendons, the nervous system to repair. And this helps to reduce fatigue and it prepares you to actually go and train again. And we have adaptation. Adaptation basically means the body going through physiological changes in response to training stress. And it helps the body to be able to cope with the demands of the training next time. So an adaptation could be getting stronger muscles from strength training, could be improved aerobic capacity from fartlek training or something like that. Next, we have variation. Variation is the idea that intentionally changing parts of the training. So this could be changing the training method, changing the intensity of training, the actual exercises that you're using to train. Changing it up could prevent you from reaching a plateau. It could prevent your workouts from being boring, and it can help you to manage fatigue while still improving. And lastly, individual needs. Now, individual needs, very simple idea that the training should be tailored to the person's abilities, the person's goals, the person's age, the person's injury history, their lifestyle, their preferences. So if someone comes to you and they have chest pains, don't program them to go run a marathon, because that's not specific and that's not individual to their needs. Okay, before we end, we're going to look at periodization, and all you need to know for periodization are 3 main aspects of periodization. We have the microcycle. The microcycle is basically a long-term plan. So periodization is how you structure your training, and structuring it in a microcycle could be structuring it in terms of months and years. So maybe I have a few months in a year where I focus on strength training, and then the other months left in the year I focus on aerobic training. Or it could be that for 1 year I focus on training for speed, and then the next year I focus on only training for strength. So that's breaking down your training in a timeline of months and years. Then move on to mesocycle, which is breaking down training within weeks and months. And then microcycle, which is the smallest timeline, is a shortest cycle, which is where you break down your training within a week. So maybe on 2 days of the week, I'm working on legs. The other 2 days, I'm working on chest, something like that. So that's all for Unit 2. Here's the cheat code that the exam board really wants, right? This is AO4 and AO5 stuff. So for every element of your program, when you're designing your program, think about what you're choosing. So think about the method, the intensity, and the frequency. So that's number 1. What you choose. Then think about what evidence made you choose it. So this can be evidence from the questionnaire, the test results, or the client's goals. And I think about why it fits. So link it to the fitness component or the health needs of the client. And I think about how it progresses. So this has to do with overload and progression that we've just looked at. Then think about what risks you controlled. So the screening and safety considerations and recovery will help you to be able to control risks. And then lastly, you want to think about how you're going to evaluate success. So you might want to retest certain things, and you might want to take certain notes on the client's well-being. So that's basically covering AO4, AO5, even AO3, and that's going to give you those big marks. See you in the next video.